Should it be legal or not?
Well,
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for times when politicians put their foot in their mouth when talking to a journalist.
Our next door neighbors are foreign countries. They're in the state that I am the executive of.
Number 20, David Cameron with the Gay Times. During an interview with the Gay Times, conservative leader David Cameron hoped to tout his party as being progressive on gay rights.
And I think all centre-right parties, all Conservative parties have to go on this journey. I think we've probably gone a bit further and faster than some Conservative parties in other countries.
Unfortunately, his colleagues were not as progressive on the issue as he was, which made his pitch much harder.
The MEPs have their own leader, they have their own group, and it's not something I just don't routinely look at their voting behaviour and say, will you do this rather than that?
Cameron struggled to answer for his party's voting record on gay rights, particularly his European Parliament members' vote on a resolution condemning an anti-gay law in Lithuania. The Tory leader distanced himself before doing a reversal and saying he allows his colleagues to vote how they want on gay rights without whipping votes. Cameron was uncomfortable, and during the interview, he asked to stop the cameras.
Can we stop for a second?
Number 19, Natalie Bennett LBC radio interview. In February 2015, Green Party leader Natalie Bennett participated in an interview with Nick Ferrari on LBC that was widely considered a car wreck.
In terms of council housing, we want to build 500,000 new social rent homes. That means council...
Where will you get the money from for that?
This was largely due to her thoughts on a proposed housing plan. When pressed on how much money she thought it would take to give housing to 500,000 people, she responded it would cost £2.7 billion.
We're looking at a total spend of £2.7 billion.
500,000 homes, 2.7. What are they made of? Plywood?
That would average out to £5,400 per house, so that's just bad math. The interview was a massive embarrassment for the Green Party.
That's not much more than a large conservatory, £60,000. So where's the land? How are you going to pay for the land?
Right, well, what we're looking at doing is basically...
When addressing the interviews, Bennett said she had experienced, quote, mental brain fade. Number 18, Ted Kennedy's delayed response. It's understandable when a political candidate flounders after being asked a complex question, but Ted Kennedy failed to properly answer the easiest softball question ever asked.
Why do you want to be president?
Well, I'm...
During an interview with Roger Mudd on his 1980 presidential bid, the late senator was asked why he wanted to be president. This question was followed by an awkward pause that took too long, followed by a response that in no way justified the length of his pause.
It just seems to me that this nation can cope and deal with its problems in a way that it has in the past.
The interview, particularly his failure to address this simple question, was seen as a disaster that was partly responsible for dooming his presidential campaign.
You have to come to grips with the different issues.
Number 17, Boris Johnson gives reporter the cold shoulder. On the eve of the 2019 parliamentary election, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was helping out at a dairy in Leeds as part of a campaign event.
Hey, come on Good Morning Britain, Prime Minister, if you get the chance.
However, Jonathan Swain, a reporter for Good Morning Britain, showed up hoping to get an interview right before the big election. Johnson humored him, but he was able to give Swain the slip with the only exit available, the dairy freezer.
Prime Minister, will you deliver on your promise to come on Good Morning Britain?
Of course I will.
While the Good Morning Britain team may have been disappointed with the rejection, they were given an iconic awkward moment that is uniquely Johnson. Number 16, Steve Scalise and George Stephanopoulos. It looked like a regular appearance on ABC's This Week for House Majority Leader Steve Scalise in November 2023, until George Stephanopoulos brought up the 2020 election.
He said that you're one of those leaders who hasn't been unequivocal in saying it was a clean election, that Joe Biden did not steal the election. Your response?
Well, Ken, I've worked with on a number of issues.
When Scalise was asked whether he thought the 2020 election was stolen or not, the congressman avoided giving an affirmative yes or no. Instead, he dodged the question, claiming that states didn't properly follow their election rules.
Can you say unequivocally that the 2020 election was not stolen?
What I've told you is there are states that didn't follow their laws.
Stephanopoulos stayed persistent, asking the question 6 times, but Scalise wouldn't commit to a definite answer.
Yes or no, was the 2020 election stolen?
What I've told you is Joe Biden's the president of the United States, and right now he's failing the country on so many fronts that matter to families.
The dance that Scalise did in avoiding the question made him look small. Number 15, Jeremy Paxman and Chloe Smith. Poor economics secretary to the Treasury Chloe Smith had to answer for budget decisions when she went on Newsnight in June 2012.
When was the decision taken?
As I say, it's been under consideration for some time. The Chancellor and the Prime Minister.
Host Jeremy Paxman was like a dog with a bone, repeatedly asking Smith about a fuel-duty U-turn. Smith tried to spin undoing the tax hike as a gift to the taxpayer, but failed to explain how this money would be paid for.
The figure will be drawn from underspends in departmental budgets.
Where?
It was believed that Smith's boss, George Osborne, had set her up to fail by making this decision right before she was set to go on the show. Number 14, Trump opens up to Lester Holt. After Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, the former president sat down with NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt to defend his decision.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey.
At first, Trump tried to justify the decision by claiming that Comey was unfit for the position, but he eventually admitted that the Russian investigation was a motivating factor in firing Comey.
Are you angry with Mr. Comey because of his Russia investigation?
I just want somebody that's competent.
The interview caused a political firestorm, making it look like Trump had something to hide regarding alleged collusion between him and Russia. It was even parodied on Saturday Night Live, where Michael Che as Lester Holt seemed surprised by the brazen admission.
Did I get him? Is this all over? Oh, no, I didn't. Nothing matters. Absolutely nothing matters anymore.
Number 13, Rob Ford's substance use response. Most politicians would tread carefully when faced with a scandal related to alleged drug use, but not Rob Ford.
Do you smoke crack cocaine?
Exactly. Yes, I have smoked crack cocaine.
When the late Toronto mayor faced questions from reporters in 2013 over a rumored video of him smoking an illegal substance, he was frank about his experience. Though Ford openly admitted to smoking crack, he denied having substance use disorder. However, admitting to trying a powerful narcotic under a, quote, drunken stupor doesn't help give the impression that he's in control.
Yes, I've made mistakes. All I can do now is apologize and move on.
While we want our elected leaders to be transparent, Rob Ford may have been too real. Number 12, Nathan Dahm and Jon Stewart. Oklahoma State Senator Nathan Dahm attracted a lot of attention for an awkward interview he did on the Apple TV Plus show The Problem with Jon Stewart.
You're saying more guns makes us more safe.
Yes.
So when we got 400 million guns in the country, we had an increase and gun deaths went up. So when exactly does this curve hit?
During the interview, Stewart pressed Senator Dahm on his position regarding gun control, accusing the lawmaker of being negligent and hypocritical.
If you don't have background checks and you don't have registration and permitting, how do you know who has a problem in terms of the people who you're giving a gun to?
Stewart skewered the politician, who was barely able to respond to the well-positioned questions.
You want to say I'm a Second Amendment purist and I'm making it safer. You're not. You're making it more chaotic. And that's not a matter of opinion. That's the truth.
That is a matter of opinion, John.
At first, Senator Dahm didn't see a problem with the appearance, but he later claimed that Stewart had selectively edited the interview to make him look bad. Number 11, Gary Johnson is asked about Aleppo. In 2016, some voters were looking for an alternative to the two major party presidential candidates, and Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson was getting a lot of attention.
And what is Aleppo? You're kidding. No.
During an appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe, the former New Mexico governor was asked what he would do about Aleppo as president. The question stumped Johnson, who was apparently unaware that Aleppo was at the center of a humanitarian crisis during the Syrian war.
It's just a mess.
The interview was seen as an embarrassing disaster, highlighting Johnson's weakness in foreign policy. The incident is so infamous that when Johnson was stumped during an interview later that year, he called it another, quote, Aleppo moment.
Name a foreign leader that you respect. I guess I'm having an Aleppo moment.
Number 10, James Diaz forgets the 6-point plan. We're used to politicians dodging questions about actual policy plans as long as they can. But Australian Liberal Parliament candidate James Diaz takes it to another level.
And we have a plan, we have a 6-point plan to make sure that we do stop the boats.
6 points, could you run through them for us?
Diaz was asked in an interview with Network 10 to detail his party's 6-point plan to curb the influx of asylum seekers to the country. Only he couldn't remember any of them.
Under Kevin Rudd, the boats...
There's 6 points. Turn back the boats?
Sure. Look, here's the thing.
Diaz proceeded to provide broad answers instead of his specific points, and was asked to outline his party's plans several more times before the interview reached its merciful end.
Well, I've answered your question.
You've said turn back the boats. You told me it was a 6-point plan. What about the other 5 points?
The blunder eventually went viral, and Diaz conceded defeat in the parliamentary election. Number 9. Michael Grimm threatens New York One reporter. New Yorkers are famous for their no-nonsense, hard-boiled attitudes, which can come out at some pretty inopportune moments. After President Obama's 2014 State of the Union address, New York Congressman Michael Grimm was talking to New York One political reporter Michael Scotto about the speech. When asked about fraud allegations he was facing, Grimm said he wouldn't be addressing it and walked off camera.
This is only about the president.
Well, what about...
Thank you.
But after it looked like Scotto had wrapped up his piece, Grimm threatened him with violence, only to find the camera was still on.
Let me be clear to you. You ever do that to me again, I'll throw you in this.
Grimm apologized to Scotto the next day, and in the ultimate bit of poetic irony, was later arrested on those campaign fraud accusations that he fought so hard to dodge. Number 8. Michael Howard grilled by Jeremy Paxman. British ex-Home Secretary Michael Howard got a masterclass in the power of repetition after this embarrassment.
Mr. Howard, have you ever lied in any public statement?
Certainly not.
In this iconic 1997 interview on BBC's Newsnight, anchor Jeremy Paxman grills Howard over and over about whether he forced the hand of Derek Lewis, Director General of Her Majesty's Prison Service, to fire a prison governor. There, Paxman asks Howard a simple question.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I was not.
And when he doesn't answer it, he asks him again.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
The truth.
In total, Paxman asks Howard if he threatened to overrule Lewis 12 times. Howard's reputation was damaged as a result of the controversy, while Paxman's questioning lives on in the hallowed halls of British journalism. Number 7. Adam Bolton versus Alastair Campbell. Following the 2010 United Kingdom general election, the newly elected Conservative Party was trying to craft a deal with the Liberal Democrat Party to form a coalition government.
Adam, I know that you've been sort of spending the last few years saying Gordon Brown's dead meat and he should be going anyway.
I'm not just saying that.
It was creating some tensions, as seen in this interview featuring Sky News editor Adam Bolton and journalist Alastair Campbell. The piece starts off civil, but then devolves into a shouting match between the two men, with Campbell accusing Bolton of a conservative bias, and Bolton telling Campbell to not tell him what he thinks.
I'm fed up with you telling me what I think.
I don't care what you're fed up with.
The whole thing was like watching a really classy train wreck. Number 6. David Frost interviewing Richard Nixon. After being the first U.S. president to ever resign from office, Richard Nixon wisely spent a couple of years out of the public eye. But in 1977, the disgraced ex-president returned to open up to the American people in a series of interviews with British reporter David Frost.
What did Haldeman tell you during the 18.5-minute gap?
Haldeman's notes are the only recollection I have of what he told me.
The interviews featured Frost grilling Nixon on his life, presidency, and, of course, his scandals. While Frost was commended for his work, Nixon didn't come off as well.
You are reading there out of context, out of order, because I have read this and I know it really better than you do.
Just listen to the legendary line where he defended his questionable actions.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Nixon may have denied the allegations against him until his death, but these interviews are as much a part of his infamy as the Watergate scandal. Number 5. Diane Abbott walks off for a phone call. Well, this one's pretty rude. Labour Party MP Diane Abbott found herself in hot water in 2012 when she sent out a tweet that said, quote, "White people love playing divide and rule."
I was actually referring to the nature of 19th century European colonialism, but that's a bit much again to 140 characters.
Sky News was able to catch up with the Member of Parliament to ask her what she meant by her potentially divisive tweet. She gave an explanation and then said she believed the tweet was being taken out of context, before getting a phone call and walking off camera mid-interview.
Explain to us what you actually meant by the comment.
Sky News later found out that Labour Party head Ed Miliband was very likely on the other end of the call, giving her a very stern talking to. Number 4. Mal Meninga's 28-second career. People from all walks of life and careers have tried their hand at public office.
Former Australian Rugby League star Mel Meninga tried a career in Canberra. For a moment, anyway.
whether they be business people, doctors, or even actors. But we've rarely seen athletes dabble in politics, and Australian Mal Meninga gave us a glimpse as to why.
I was just a person out there making sure that I was...
Meninga was a legendary rugby player turned coach when he decided to take his work in a different direction in 2001. That year, he campaigned as an independent for the Australian Capital Territory Legislative Assembly, announcing his candidacy in an interview on ABC, only to get cold feet 28 seconds in and walk out of the studio.
I'm buggered. I'm sorry.
Number 3. Todd Akin's legitimate sexual assault comments.
Are there any circumstances in your mind in which an abortion should be legal?
Well, I think sometimes people talk about life of the mother as a situation, Charles.
Missouri Congressman Todd Akin proved he fell asleep in biology when he gave this interview during his campaign for U.S. Senate in 2012. When asked about his views on abortion, he gave an answer that defied all medical logic, saying the bodies of female sexual assault victims had the power to shut out an unwanted pregnancy.
The female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
He also made more than a few people angry by trying to classify some sexual assault as legitimate. Understandably, Akin was blasted by the public and both American political parties for his comments, and it's believed that they were the reason he lost the election. Akin eventually apologized for the remark, but it still had a lasting effect on his career. Number 2. Sarah Palin with Katie Couric. In 2008, Republican nominee for U.S. President John McCain shocked everyone by choosing unknown Alaska Governor Sarah Palin as his running mate.
I'll let Governor Palin speak for herself.
The American people were eager to learn more about her, and they got their wish in a series of interviews with CBS Evening News anchor Katie Couric. But instead of showing everyone why she should be the second most powerful person in America, Palin utterly embarrassed herself in the interviews by coming off as unprepared and unknowledgeable.
Oh, well, some decisions that have been made poorly should not be rewarded, of course.
Some of the highlights of the infamous interviews included Palin talking about her home state's relationship to Russia, and of course, her taste in newspapers.
All of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years.
While Couric was showered with praise for her journalism efforts, the McCain-Palin campaign never recovered. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Christopher Young's singing talents. Local news is great for shining a spotlight on politicians that wouldn't get exposure anywhere else.
Why did you get into politics in the first place?
Well, I got into politics to bring attention to the issues that matter to the people of the state of Rhode Island.
In the build-up to the 2010 Providence mayoral election, Rhode Island station WPRI interviewed candidates to give viewers a better idea of who was running for office. One of these candidates happened to be Democrat Christopher Young. While the interview begins with some substantive discussion, Young quickly transitions to something not related to politics, namely his talent for writing songs.
To the rich man who stands in his house, high upon the hill.
Young then pulls out a tiny speaker and sings one of his compositions, making a minute and a half feel like eternity. Yeah, maybe don't take up a music career.
And are you lost?
Chris, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in and serenading me this morning.
Which of these political interview fails do you think was the most embarrassing? Let us know in the comments.
If you were writing it today,
yes, I'm
would
proud
you
of this
include
book.
the dog story?
I'm proud of this book.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.